Welcome, dear audience. Here we are after a week break. We are back again live, and today we will start with a professional masterclass with our Professor Ida Tudi from Philippines with her masterclass today, the lexicon. And for this, I would welcome her. She's not somebody very new to everyone, right? She has done professional masterclass before. She had been our guest at the same time. So she will give a brief introduction about herself, from which university she is from, um, and we'll start straight away. Yeah, welcome, Professor Ida Gauran Tudi. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Professor Estera. I am a Dr. Ida Goranchudi from the City College of Davao, Philippines. And I'll be discussing about the lexicon of the English language. So there are various aspects of the lexicon of the English language that we are going to explore in the presentation of mine. Allow me to proceed with the next slide. So there are actually various games and activities that we can give to our students to improve their lexicon, their command of the language, particularly in terms of the choice and use of words. So here are the following. We have here, as you can see, the various games that teachers or educators can employ. Now, if we are going to speak of the lexicon, what do you mean by such? So, from the definition, we have here it is characterized as a mental inventory of words and productive word derivational processes. So, inventory of words. I think if you don't really have the command of the English language, if you are new in learning the English language, one really is expected to have difficulty. That's why we need to study the lexicon. We need to have this inventory of words so that we can be spontaneous when we are going to speak using the English language. And we also have productive word derivational processes. So we will discuss briefly, we'll give details to expound more on this. It would also mean single words. We also have word compounds, conventional multi-word phrases. So before I will proceed, I acknowledge the main source of this presentation, also with the pictures that I am using or images, so they are acknowledged in its slide. Now let's have this question or activity that will, in a way, arouse you to think about lexicon. We have here find three adjectives that can go before the noun tone. What do you think are the adjectives we can think of before the noun tone? What prepositions can be used after the noun rejection? Hmm. So you can think of the possible answers. Is arouse a transitive or intransitive verb? So one way or another, you have listened to talks or discussion about verbs. So you can also have idea on this. So you can explain this further. Find three nouns that go before or after the verb arouse. So what could be the nouns before the word arouse or after the word arouse? Identify what part of speech is each italicized word. He saw the beginning of insanity in her. Insanity? What part of speech is this word? The next, woodpeckers inhabit hollow trees. Inhabit. What do you think of this part of speech? What word? What part of speech is this word inhabit? Now let's go into details as to our possible responses to the questions that I have thrown a while ago. Adjectives that can go before the noun tone are the following. We have high, mid, low tone, low rising tone, falling tone, masculine conciliatory tone. Then we have soft tone. So there are actually a lot of adjectives that we can add before the noun tone. We could also have greenish tone, light tone of blue that refers to color, or muscle tone. Now, as regards question two, what prepositions, particularly two prepositions, can be used after the noun rejection? Let's take a look at these possible responses. 2.1, rejection of the lawyer's requests. So we have here preposition after the noun rejection of, that is the preposition of, followed by the noun phrase, the lawyer's request. Rejection of the charges against him. So we have of as our preposition. The second example that we have here, rejection from family or a girl. He experienced rejection from his family or from a girl. So basically, we have the use of preposition of and from in the context that are given. Now, let's proceed with the word arouse. Is it a transitive or intransitive verb? Let's take a look at the examples. The husky sound of her voice could arouse him. Then we have here the proposal is certain to arouse the opposition. So the first two examples fall under transitive verb. That means arouse is used as a transitive verb because it takes an object to complete the thought of the sentence. Could arouse him. So him is the object. And then the second one, arouse the opposition. The opposition is the object of the verb arouse. So that would make the verb arouse a transitive verb in the two examples that we have. Another example, arouse could also be used as intransitive verb. That means we don't need an object in our sentence after our verb arouse. So that would make it intransitive. Let's look at the example that we have here. She aroused early or arose early and went directly to the police station. So this followed right away by an adverb, not a noun or pronoun. So the verb in the second sentence is considered intransitive verb. So that would mean that the word arouse could be used either transitive, that would take an object, or it could be intransitive. It may also be used as an intransitive verb that will not necessarily take an object in the sentence. Now, our answer to the 3.2 question, find three nouns that go in the example that we have here after the verb arouse. So we have arouse, the opposition, arouse the interest, like interest of the audience, or arouse the audience. So we have here the three words opposition, interest, and audience are all nouns that go after the verb arouse. So that would mean if we are going to have arouse as transitive verb, it would take the direct object, a noun that is the direct object of such transitive verb. In our case here, we have opposition for the first sentence. We have interest. That's also a noun in the second sentence. And the third, in the phrase, we have arouse the audience. Audience is also a noun. Now, identify what part of speech is each italicized word. So this time we will identify if when we say part of speech, we have noun, pronoun, verb, adjective. So these are all examples of part of speech. So let's have this 4.1 as the example. He saw the beginning of insanity in her. Insanity here is used as a noun in the sentence. The second, woodpeckers inhabit hollow trees. So the italic word here, or word in italic, is inhabit. That functions as a verb. So answering those four questions and sub-questions that I have, that when we can associate other topics or subtopics when we speak about lexicon or vocabulary of the English language. Now, let's have the reasons for the author's preference of the lexical grammar. Let's have these three. First, the interlingual argument, that which is accomplished grammatically in one language can be realized lexically in another. So what do we mean by this? Let's take a look at this example. Warao, a language from Venezuela, attaches a grammatical inflection to a verb that corresponds to a modal verb can. This is a separate lexical item in English, meaning we do have the use of the language, the construction of the language differently in different various languages. In this example, in Venezuela, when they say, let's say, can dance, it will only be in one sentence, having inflection of the verb added in the root word. Unlike if you would express the same thought in English, you need to have the word can separately, and then you have the verb follows, the verb that follows. So we have here, that's an example of an interlingual argument. Like if you say in our own language, makabasa, basa is read. So we add maka, that means can read. But in English, we say can read. These are two separate words or lexical items. Now, from the intra-language perspective, that many multilingual lexical units conform to the grammar of a language. That is, they adhere to acceptable word order. Let's have this in English. The lexical order is always by the way. You're gonna say way by the. I mean, you're gonna rumble certain phrases. That means they are ordered in certain correct way. These patterned multilingual or multi-word phrases are basic intermediate units between lexis, a word. It's where we got the word lexicon, lexis words, and we have their grammar. That's according to Nottinger and De Carico, 1992. Now, when we focus on the extremes at the end of the continuum, the dichotomy between grammar and lexicon seems to hold. Content words thing vary enormously in their concreteness of meaning and in their semantics specifically. So you say thing, what is that thing? So it will vary depending on the context, depending on who the speakers are. So we have this content word. Now let's dwell into or focus into the lexical units of three levels. First, that of individual word and its components. Second, that of word compounds and occurrence. That means there are certain words that they go together. And the last, that of conventional multi-word phrases. Like, let's say, on the other hand, you cannot say on the other, but they are taken as one. That's why they are called multi-word phrases. All right, what does it mean to know a word? So these are different aspects that we could associate with studying a certain word. First, we have spelling, or we call that orthography. So when we are asked of a word, of course, we need to see to it that the spelling of the word is also correct because it may imply a different meaning, or it may also give a different interpretation. Second, we have phonemic representation. So that would mean how do we pronounce certain words? We also have to consider syllabication, and we have the stress or accentuation. Third, we have morphological irregularity when that is, of course, applicable. Then we have syntactic features and restriction that would include the part of speech. Next, we have common derivations and collocations. That means these are the words that occur together or that go together. We have semantic features and restrictions. And lastly, we have pragmatic features and restriction. So let's have the first aspect. So we have here the child. Obviously, that's how we spell the word. Now let's look into the semantic information. When we say semantic, what do you mean by child? So what do we associate? How do we interpret the word child? So let's have this semantic information. This is associated with human being or human. When it comes to gender, it's neutral because the child that will not give a definite from the word in itself. It does not give a definite gender. That's why it's neutral. Younger humans. That is, of course, in contrast with infant and baby because it's really different when you say infant and then we compare it with a child. Then also older humans, in contrast with adolescent and adult. So these are really different groups. Now let's have pragmatic or use perspective. Now when do we use the word child? How do we use that in the sentence? So now in the pragmatic sense, when we use the word child, it is in a way formal. So we use kid if it is in informal contexts for English speakers. Kids in plural form, that's the usual way we use in the sentence. But when we say kid, it has a pejorative or a negative connotation if you use it in a single form or in singular form. It's a snow day today. My kids are home from school. That's acceptable. It's a snow day today. My kid is home from school. So, in a way, that is questionable. Now, for native speakers, they prefer to use son or daughter or some other word when referring to the child. Obviously, when we have this son, we already have the gender is no longer neutral, but this is, of course, a masculine. The other one, daughter, is feminine. Now let's try to look at the combination. What other words can we combine with the word child? So you can say this child. This is correct. But you cannot say these child because the word this is plural. We do expect that the noun after the word this should also be plural. So you would say these children, but never say this child. So even you have not finished constructing your sentence, even if you only have a combination of two words, this is actually a noun phrase, but you already have incorrect phrase, the wrong combination of words. Now we have these children, of course. This is the correct way. We have these, that's plural in form. We paired it with the word children. That's also plural. But you can never say, that's in asterisk, that's wrong, this children. So there is contrast. This is singular and you pair it with the plural noun children. So that would make the phrase wrong. So again, even when you construct phrases, there's a correct way to do it. Combination of words would also matter. So remember correct combination of words. This is just an example. Then we have many children. We use the word many because we can count. Um, we have the noun children, but never you say much children. So the mismatch of the terms much usually pair it with those not countable, and with the noun countable children. Now, allow me to continue. Semantic information is used when we accept a lexical item in certain combinations as meaningful. So semantic, again, when you say semantic, we're referring to meaning. So the meaning that we attach to certain lexical item or words or vocabulary that we do use. Let's take to look at the example. The child slept for 2 hours. Is the statement sensical? Does it make sense? Obviously, we say yes, the sentence is correct because the child, of course, usually have can do the verb slept. Okay, for 2 hours. But we reject it in others as nonsensical. That means it does not make sense, at least in any literal sense. So I say the child evaporated 2 hours ago. You say evaporated, it's something that it vanishes. In a way, this is in a way associated with something like liquid. All right. But you cannot pair this verb with the noun child. Okay, this is something concrete. So the child evaporated 2 hours ago. This may be grammatically correct, but this may not be accepted semantically since the meaning is also not appropriate. The child as a subject of the sentence is not appropriate with the use of the verb evaporated. So
Prof,
meaning,
sorry to interrupt, Prof. But just now for the
yes,
word, you can substitute if the word is the child disappeared for
yeah,
two
yes,
hours,
yes.
we can use. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
thank you
evaporate
so much
itself.
for that, dear Prof.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. You know why? Because sometimes this audience might be asking. So by me just checking with you, you confirm it, then it will be, they understand better. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thank you
Please
so
carry.
much for that. So if you are going to have the word disappeared, it will now be sensical. That means that is accepted. That means the mother has to look for that child. So let us remember the appropriateness of the term that we use with other words in the sentence. Thank you for that, dear Prof. This time, we are going to have here morphemes. So since we talk about words and vocabulary, this time constitute words. So what are the different word parts? So we now have the morphemes. Let's have here the form of words or morpheme. Morphemes, they are actually divided into two basic categories. We have free morpheme and then we have bound morpheme. Under free morpheme, we have lexical content. So when we say lexical content, these may include major part of speech like the nouns, verbs, adjectives, and so on. The other free morphemes are or have this grammatical function. They're considered those minor part of speech. They're not considered content words, but they are present in the sentence for grammatical purposes. So we have articles, the, on, prepositions, on, of, under, conjunctions, and, but, however, and the like. So these are considered minor part of speech that they fall under grammatical function. So they are present in the sentence for grammatical purposes. Unlike for the lexical content, these are the major part of speech. Even we lack minor part of speech or those articles, prepositions, you can still get the essence of the sentence since these are important words or these are the content words in the sentence. Now let's go to the bound morphemes. What are these bound morphemes? We have lexical content. That means we have here derivational morphemes like the ion. Particularly, we have the suffix ion. Later, we have more examples that we can give in this. And we have grammatical function. Inflectional, we have here s and then es. Now, let's have these bound morphemes. Again, we have bound morphemes consist of two kinds. We have derivational and inflectional. So let's look at derivational. It's when a morpheme added to a word. We see morpheme, that's a word part. So when a word part is added to a word, results in either a different part of speech. So like when you add a certain affix or suffix to the root word from one part of speech, it is now changed into another. You now have derivational morpheme. Or it may be the same part of speech, but the meaning is different with that of the original word. So take note. Remember, it involves affixes. Let's take to look at the example. We have here prefix on. So that means not. And then we have the root word bend. So we now study the different word parts. In the example here, we have bend is the root word and then on is our prefix. Particularly, we classify it as derivational morpheme. Why derivational in this case? Looking at the explanation that we have. Bend here is our verb. We added on. That would make it contrary to the meaning of the original word bend. So again, we have here, it may be the same part of speech, but now have a different lexical meaning. So the meaning is now opposite. That means not bend or unbend. All right. Another definition that we have here is when we add certain affixes to the root word, it will change the part of speech. Let's take a look at this example. Argument. We add the suffix ment, since that is suffix added to the after the root word. So we have here meant. From the word argue is a verb. Now when we add meant, it is now a noun. So the verb is now transformed or converted into a noun. We have a new word that is a different part of speech from the original, which is a verb. So that will now fall under derivational affixes. That means meant is a derivational affix. Now let's proceed with inflectional morpheme. If a morpheme simply adds some element of meaning required by the grammar and changes the form of a word without changing its basic part of speech. Let's say, we say inflectional, meaning we add certain parts, certain affixes to adjust or to fit in the grammar of the sentence. But the meaning is still the same part of speech. So let's have this example. The word watch. Watch is a verb. So if we say she is watching, so we say we add ing to the verb watch. So we have the same part of speech. This is still a verb, but we only have a different form, but the meaning is the same and the same part of speech. That's why we classify the ing, this affix ing, as inflectional morpheme. Now let's have here 8 inflectional affixes in English. There are actually 4 of them involved verbs. So we have the present participle, just like the example that I gave a while ago. We have watching. Then we have watching, doing, playing. So the ing form, the verb, they fall under present participle. We have the ing. Then we have present tense. So meaning we have here present tense third person, we add s to make our verb in singular. Like we say, she walks, the boy walks. So you say you cannot say the boy walk. Boy there is singular. Obviously, we need to pair such noun with the singular form of the verb. So the singular form is walk, walks. So that is singular, meaning third person referring to the boy. And then we have walks here. We added the morpheme s to fit in the grammar of our sentence. So it does not really change the part of speech is still a verb, but we do have some changes with the word to accommodate the correct grammar, to observe correct grammar. Now we have past tense, meaning if we use the verb in the past form, so we need to add d or ed. So still the same, it is inflectional because it does not change the part of speech. And the meaning is not also altered. So we have past participle eaten from the word eat. We add en, still the same. That is a verb form. Usually we have has eaten, have eaten. Okay, had eaten. So it's still a verb form in the past participle. Now there are two, so therefore, two added to nouns. We have here John's. We have S added to the noun John in possessive form. We say possessive form, that means it shows ownership. John's parents. Whose parents? We have John's. All right. Plural also, we add S. Let's have book is singular to make the plural. If you are referring to many books, you add S. And so you have now books. So we have this S as our inflectional affix. So no changing of the part of speech, no changing of meaning. So just to fit in with the grammar that we have in our construction. We also have two of them come at the end of adjectives and adverbs. So the adjectives are descriptive words. And then we have adverbs. Usually we have the adverb of place, adverb of time. These are the words that modify the verbs in adjectives in the sentence. So let's have here the comparative degree clear. That is adjective. Then you have here comparative. That means there are two being compared. You have clearer. You add ER. So ER here is our inflectional affix. Then fasts from the word fast. If there are two persons or two being compared, you have now the adjective faster. And ER here is, of course, our inflectional affix. So no changing of the part of speech and no altering of meaning, except that you know that there are comparisons going on. And then we have superlative. So you're referring to a group. We have the most. We have clearest. So we say this is the clearest presentation. So you compare all of those among those, not just two persons or individuals or two groups, but many. And then fastest. So we have EST that is used in superlative. Now, inflectional affixes that are not suffixes. That means we also have this irregular form. We cannot just have all the affixes because there are exceptions to the rule. Remember, when we have English, we speak about grammar, we do associate it with rule. But let's take note that there are rules and there are also exceptions to the rule. So this is just an example of the irregular form that we don't really add affix, but of course, there are changes internally in certain construction of words. First, we have the inflectional vowel morpheme. So, meaning that the change is in the vowel of the word. Let's say mouse. Instead of mouse, there's a change here in I. So, we have mice to make it plural. We don't say mouses to make it plural. That is wrong because mouse is an irregular form. That means the rule that we have just discussed a while ago to make certain nouns or words plural, we simply add s or es. This do not apply to this irregular form of the noun given here, particularly mouse. You can say mouses, but the appropriate way is mice to make it plural. Then when we talk about the form of the verb in the past form, we have the example of irregular verb here from the word ring that is in present form. When we talk about the past form, we cannot say ringed. We cannot add d or ed to make it a past form of the verb, but we simply change the vowel from I, we change to a, that is rang. to, of course, change the verb into its past form. So it's again a regular form of the verb. Then you have wrong, that is in past participle. So wrong, you do not say wronged, right? So we have this internal change. Particularly, we have here the vowel, changes in the vowel from I, we have A, then we have U. Now let's have the second one. We have no change. So whether you are referring to a singular, noun, or plural, it will not change the word in itself. So there's no change at all to indicate the number, whether it's singular or plural. But this is an example of exception as well. One deer. So you have deer. In the usual form that we have, we can say several deers, but we cannot add s to make the word plural because this is an irregular word. You don't apply a certain rule that we discussed a while ago, but this is always deer without s, whether singular or plural. You will simply identify depending on the meaning implied by your sentence and some other words that you paired with the word deer. Now, obviously, when you have one here, this is one referring to one, singular, even there's no change in dear. Then we have several, this refers to many, but of course, the form is not added with s, it's the same, dear. So that's why it's stated here, it's zero plural, no adding of the affix, particularly suffix to make this plural. So no change at all. Now we have hit. So we have here, the first is actually a noun, the other one is a verb. So whether that's present tense, we have past tense, or even past participle, there is no alteration to the word. That's why there's no change at all. And there are still other examples also. Then we have the third, the suppletive form. We have go. In the present form, it will be went. Then be, we have here was. Okay, so we have really a new word to this, suppletive word. Good, referring to this positive, better when you have comparison, then you have superlative, we have bests. All right, so we have the superlative form. Then we have bad, positive. If you have compared two or more, we have worst. And you have compared too many in the superlative form, you have worst. So we have changes here in the spelling. So those are example of inflectional affixes that are not suffixes. We don't add anything, but since they are under irregular form. Now let's proceed with pronunciation. When you speak about words or lexicon, we do also have consideration of pronunciation. So I'll just give you the basic ones. Now, since we'll be discussing about the voiced sounds and the voiceless, let's just have a brief overview what voiced sounds are and what voiceless sounds are. So let's have this one. When sounds are considered voiced, the sound creates a vibration in the vocal cords. You can easily determine if sounds are voiced or unvoiced by placing your hand at your throat, while you are uttering a certain words. You can feel here, okay, the vibration or non-vibration of the vocal cords. Now let's try to look at the example. Let's have after the sounds and all of this, suffix is pronounced as z, right? The schwa and the sound. So you say judges, judges, roses. You didn't say roses, but roses, roses, roses. So we have z as the final sound. So take note, after this sound, the suffix is, we have z, judges, roses, roses. But you don't say judges, roses, rushes. All right, so judges, roses, rushes. Okay, after all other voiced sounds, say voice sounds again with vibration. Suffix, suffix, when you say suffix, that is added at the end of the root word, or it is found at the last part of the word. It is pronounced as z. So let's have this example. Dogs. D. The final sound here is g. G. When you try to enunciate the sound g, when you can feel the vibration of the sound g, that means that when there is adding of the suffix s in the root word, you pronounce it as s. So you say dogs, dogs. All right. So voice sound, we have to add z because z is also a voiced sound. If you say toy, toys, so it's also voice sound. If you say John's, John Jay's, John Jay's, so we also have the voiced sound, Jay's, Jay's. So you feel the vibration as you utter the final sound. You can feel the vibration by touching your throat. Then, so we have run, it's voiced. Then you add S, you pronounce it as S. So we say runs, runs. Then we have cry. The I sound here is also voiced. You say cries, cries. All right. So even when we are going to add certain suffixes or certain morphemes to words, it may also imply a different pronunciation. So that could also be considered when we are going to pronounce words properly. Now, after all other voiceless, we say voiceless sounds, these are sounds that do not have vibration when you enunciate them. So, suffix is pronounced as s, because the sound is also voiceless. Remember this one, the previous one, that's voiced. So, usually when you have voiced sound, added by S. The S there suffix is pronounced as Z, voice also. But if the final sound is voiceless, meaning without vibration, when you add S, the suffix S, to that word, you pronounce it as voiceless as well. So meaning you have S. So say cats. So cats. The final sound here is voiceless. You do not say cats, right? So cats. Okay. Then we have k. K is also voiceless. You say marks. So voiceless. The final sound S is pronounced as well. S, not Z. Then walks. The k sound is the final sound, is voiceless. When you add S, the S here is pronounced as S, voiceless as well. Now let's have here the regular past tense and past participle are pronounced as, this is actually the symbol for the schwa after the t and d. Example, we have here wanted. To. You didn't say wanted, but the schwa wanted, to, wanted. Scolded, scolded. So you didn't say scolded, but say scolded, scolded. We have the schwa sound. Now, however, the sound d after all voiced sounds other than d. Example, played, judged. So you pronounce the final sound d as d, d, played, judged. So the additional enunciation of the sound d after the word play, we have d, played. That would mean you're referring to the past form of the verb. So you see, even one enunciation of a sound could also imply something. Could imply the tense, the past form, the verb of the verb here in this example that we have. Then we have judge, present tense, but if you have past form the verb, you have the final sound d if you say judged. And t, we have t, final sound t, after all voiceless sounds other than the t. Example, walk is our main verb. When you add ed, the ed here is not pronounced as d because the k is voiceless. So since the final sound here of the root word is voiceless, we need to add as well t sound, that is also voiceless. You say walked, so that's voiceless. When you try to pronounce the word and walked, final sound is t, that's voiceless. Kiss, we have s is voiceless, meaning the final sound should also be t to indicate that the verb is in past form. Now, when to use much or many? Do we interchange the two? So let's have a discussion on this. Syntactically, relevant lexical features, determiners, adjectives plus nouns. So we have here much and little. They co-occur with uncountable nouns. When you say uncountable, that's not something that you can count. Let's say much attention. You cannot count attention. So uncountable. That's why you may use the word much or little attention. So you pair it with uncountable nouns. Nouns that you cannot count. Okay. Now let's have here a, an, each. They co-occur with singular nouns, meaning when you have a in a sentence, you pair it with a noun. If you have the phrase, noun phrase, you expect that the word is a singular noun. Let's say a girl, a girl. So singular. That means even it's a phrase, we can predict what co-occur with these certain words as a, an, and each. So they co-occur with singular nouns. Each student. You're gonna say each students. That's wrong. An apple. So an is followed by the noun, the singular apple. So again, these determiners are expected to be followed by singular nouns to come up with the correct noun phrases. These, many, and few. Obviously, this co-occur with plural nouns like these people, many participants, few students. So followed, they are followed by plural nouns. Like for other terms such as various, divergent, they co-occur with plural nouns. Then the, my, his, irrespective of countability or number. Like the boy, the boys. So it may be used, may be followed by a singular or plural noun. My sister, my sisters, my siblings. So it may be singular, plural, and so on. Like also same with his. But you can say a John because this is a wrong combination of word. This is an example, exception of what we discussed a while ago. Even John is singular, then we have a, but there's no need to write the determiner a before John, but that's also incorrect. The Jackson, but the man. All right, we also have adjective, prepositional, phrase restriction. So let's have this intransitive adjective. We say intransitive, it does not require object to complete the thought of the statement. So we say intransitive adjective, let's say handsome. We don't have to add other words to complete the thought of the statement. Joe is handsome. So handsome is intransitive adjective. Mary is graceful. So that's also intransitive adjective. Handsome and graceful are intransitive adjectives that do not require nouns here or other words to complete the thought of the sentence. And our sentences are also grammatical. Transitive adjectives, of course, require additional words, certain objects to complete the thought of the statement. Like Sue is fond. If you say Sue is fond, fond is something lacking. What is Sue fond of? So something lacking, we need to add of sweets. So that would make the word fond adjective as transitive because we need here additional phrase to complete the thought of that certain adjective that is fond. So is fond is of course incorrect. So that would make our adjective transitive. It requires certain phrases here to complete the thought of that certain transitive adjective. John is related to Ralph. Related. So John is related. Related to whom? So we need to add something here to complete the thought of this adjective. So we have this prepositional phrase restriction. So take note, when you speak about transitive and intransitive, they do not just refer to verbs. Remember, we have verbs, but they could also refer to adjectives. Now, both intransitive and transitive, there are certain adjectives that they can function both transitive and intransitive depending on the use of that certain word in a statement. Like Sally is nervous, so you simply describe Sally. So we don't really have to add additional word or phrase to complete the thought of the sentence. You simply describe Sally as nervous. So this is correct. So this is intransitive in the first sentence. But you say, Sally is nervous about the quiz. Nervous as an adjective here has the adjective here or the additional phrase to modify or to explain further what is Sally nervous about. So we have here about the quiz. Therefore, nervous as an adjective in this sentence is considered transitive adjective. So, but the word nervous in itself can be used transitively or intransitively. That's why we also have certain words in verbs that are also functioning either or both. Now we have the verb noun restrictions. The lexical feature for disappear. Disappear, that would mean intransitive, and transitive for bring allow us to accept these sentences as grammatical. Let's say the stain disappeared. This is correct. Disappeared is here in the sentence is intransitive. That means not transitive, negative, transitive. The man brought a gift. So we have brought is a transitive verb. So that's why positive, transitive. It is a transitive verb because it has an object, a gift in the sentence to complete the thought of the sentence. So the first one is intransitive verb. The second one brought here in the second statement is transitive since it requires an object that is a gift in the sentence. Now we have also unacceptable. The dry cleaners disappear the stain. And so it's in a way nonsensical. Disappear the stain. Aside from it is wrong grammar, the sentence is also in a way confusing. The man brought. What is the man? See, the man brought. So something lacking. We need to add the phrase here, the object, to complete the meaning of the sentence because brought is a transitive verb. Okay, both transitive and intransitive. John opened door. So the first one, that is a transitive verb. It requires the object, the door. The second one, the door opened. So it is simply a description of the door. It does not need here additional statement to complete the thought of the sentence. But this is also correct. So meaning the word open or opened can be used transitively or intransitively. Inflation increase prices. Then prices increase. So here we have this transitive verb since it has object prices, and here we have intransitive without object. There is a special class of transitive verbs that permits the absence of a partially recoverable understood noun object, like Bill smokes cigarettes. So another statement, Bill smokes. The word here smokes could be used transitively or intransitively, and these two sentences are both correct. Harry drinks alcohol. Or you can simply say Harry drinks. So drinks could also be used as a transitive verb or intransitive verb. So these are the topics that fall under the lexicon. So meaning there are a lot of areas that we can really explore when you talk about lexicon. Thank you so much, um,
Oh,
Professor.
yes, a wonderful class. I really enjoyed the class today. I know it's a bit like a very high level for normal students. This is more to scholars. those university students and those even high school, if they are very interested to go in depth into grammar and how the tenses are formed, why certain words cannot be used in certain sentence. Wow, it's really in depth and it's so clear. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Professor Ida. We love to have you again. You got to tell us when you are coming
Sure, sure.
again. At least once a month, we love to have you because this sort of lesson is not easy for everyone to receive and also to get a chance to view. If you see in YouTube, a lot of lessons are just basics. Yeah, this is for more for higher level and scholars.
Mm.
So thank you so much for this precious sharing, and thank you. In spite of your busy day, you still come and serve our audience and
Thank you also for the opportunity you have given me. It's a pleasure also joining this
Uh,
professional
I know
masterclass.
I got a lot to learn from you as well. And I believe, dear audience, we are really grateful to Professor Ida Tudi for giving us such an insightful, in-depth explanation about the lexicon. And thank you for your time for being with us. Right after this, we will be having our Sustainable Development Goal Forum on AI, artificial intelligence in healthcare. Please do join us in about 10 more minutes. Thank you so much, Professor Ida. Thank you, everyone. We'll meet you again next week with another interesting professional masterclass. Bye.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.